All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to Sunday School. This is my second time doing this. Socially distanced version of Sunday School, I suppose, but my name's Bennett. For those of you who don't know me, I am a volunteer for high school guys at the Loft. And today I'm going to be talking about arguing. It's part of our summer series here at the Loft, and I'm going to be speaking about arguments. I'm sure you guys know, especially this summer, it seems like we can get in a lot of arguments about little things and big things. And it's important to talk about it. What does the Bible say about it? What does Jesus want us to do with arguing? And how do we address that? So that's what I'll be discussing today. And I thought I'd jump right into it by talking about, hey, we all have that friend who, for whatever reason, we can just argue with a lot. And for me, past few years, that's been one of my friends. The guys will probably relate to more of this, but I just really disagree with the sports takes. So for the girls, like guys have sports takes. They talk about sports, who they think is the best NFL quarterback, who they think is going to win the NBA Finals this year, that type of stuff. And my one friend, I love him, but I just always disagree with him on this stuff. He's just always on the opposite end of it. And for whatever reason, like, it just really bothers me. And we actually, I know it sounds silly. I'm sure for those of you who aren't like really into sports, you think that's dumb, but like, we'll end up getting sometimes into like pretty big arguments over this stuff that just seems pretty trivial on the surface level. My point is that even over trivial stuff, arguments are probably more serious than we care to admit on the surface level. I think we all like to think of ourselves as pretty, reasonable people, people who aren't gonna get super angry over, our premises and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, I think even over something dumb like sports, like the NBA, people can get enraged, and it's kind of weird, but we have to address it. And the second point of that is, I think that when we are in conflict, most people tend to do one of three things. Either they go straight to anger, so that could be, like I said, blowing up. Me and my friend, whenever we argue, sometimes we just get crazy with one another. The second thing we can do is feel torn. So maybe we're sitting on the outside of an argument and we're kind of like, oh, I agree with this side, I agree with that side. Like both of them are good. I just don't want to pick one. Or we can have the third option, which is just total apathy. We could say, I don't give a crap about this argument, frankly. Couldn't matter any less to me. For me, there's other stuff like, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I mean, there's certain stuff definitely where like I've had friends arguing about this and being like, "Oh, don't you agree with me? Don't you agree with me?" And I just totally couldn't care less. The thing that I think this isn't my point. I'll credit this curriculum for it, but this thing that we're following, this series this year, it makes a great point that I want to say. No matter what, though, when we get in an argument or we're involved with an argument, I think we want to do just one thing, which is just win. And you think about that when I say win an argument. Yeah, we want to do that no matter what, whenever we see one, I think. I mean, if we go straight to anger, then it means that we're scared we're really impassioned about the issue, and we're gonna argue over it and get angry if we don't lose, because it's our pride is on the line, we feel, and we just want to win. If we feel torn and we're like, oh, I kind of agree with both sides, I mean, in some ways, you're probably, there's probably your ego in the background in some ways. It's like, don't pick anything because you want to seem smart. You don't want to go one way or the other. And if you have the apathy thing, that's probably the same way too. You just think, why do they even care about this? They should be smart like me, and great like me, and not even care about this issue. So I think no matter what, it's our human nature. That's why we get into arguments. Even when we're not into an argument, we still care about inflating our ego. We're prideful, sinful humans, and it's what we want to do. So I think that's a great point. So all that to say, let me quickly go the other way. Is arguing bad? No, arguing's kind of necessary. There's some things in your life that you're just gonna have to argue about with, whether if it's with friends, roommates as you get older, get into college. Once you start living with people, that's arguments become bigger because they're basically in a way like a sibling, like a family member. You live with them all the time now, and eventually, and this is obviously levels away, but you start your own family, and then you get in an argument with potentially your spouse, potentially your kids in the future. So you're going to have to get at arguments at some point in your life. But if we believe that most of the time we're trying to just inflate our ego when we argue about stuff, what's the right way to do it? What's the solution? So for that, I actually suggest that, again, we follow this great curriculum that Lord gave us and go to the book of James. And I'm going to read this verse. It's James 1:19, and this is the NIV version. And it says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." So again, I'll read it one more time. "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to speak, should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. So let's get some context around that. So James, he's Jesus's brother, and obviously we know Jesus is God's son. He wasn't really, a human being, typical. He wasn't born in the typical way that we are. But James was Mary and Joseph's son. So James is Jesus's brother. So it's interesting that we're looking at this verse from the book of James. And this guy was Jesus's brother. What makes James interesting is, growing up, he probably didn't think Jesus was the Son of God. Jesus was just his older brother, like I said. And so when we talk about arguing, who do you argue with more than your siblings? They're like the people that you argue with the most. So argument is definitely relevant to James. So I think he's definitely a great guy to go to on this issue. Second, James's book has some really controversial stuff in it, and stuff that a lot of people probably at the time and a lot of people throughout history have disagreed with. Maybe controversial is the wrong word, but some very opinionated stuff. And so James was clearly probably a guy, judging by the way he wrote, who was outspoken and, not afraid to argue. So I think, again, like I said, James, if we're looking at the book of James in the Bible, that's a great book to go to. James, fortunately, even though he's Jesus' biological brother, he began to see something in Jesus that, as he got older, that he hadn't seen before. His brother wasn't acting like God. He was God in a body. When James changed his mind about Jesus and saw him for who he really was, it put everything else into perspective. And one of the things that included was conflict. So, when we look at this verse, I think let's just analyze it quick and see what James says. First of all, he said we should be slow to speak. Okay, so I think that's relevant because it's important, because it doesn't mean we should all just sit back and listen to whatever somebody else throws at us, not necessarily. But it also doesn't mean that we should speak reactively. Okay, so a lot of times I think we can all agree that when you argue, we can kind of lose our cool over stuff because we just react immediately. Oh, well, he means this when he says this. Not necessarily true. Hey, take a breath, back up, be wise with this, be slow to speak. Think about what the other person is saying. And also, listen, be quick to listen with that. That's another huge part of this verse. Try, and even if you think you're still really going to disagree with somebody, try and really take what they say into account. Try and see it from their point of view. I think we got to be empathetic with that, and I'll get more to that later. The second thing is, I think, another thing important to remember: slow to become angry. Hey, a lot of times when you get angry, unfortunately, you could just lose the person completely. You might win the argument, but one of the great things that this lesson points out is the person's still going to be there after the argument. So if you win the argument and you lose the friendship, which can happen, what are you even really arguing for? Is it even worth just feeling like you're smarter than the other person if you're not going to hang out with them? So I think that's what this verse is saying on a quick level is, if we think about everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Be empathetic. That's one thing James says. Try and see it from their point of view. Be slow to speak. Don't react to what you initially think they mean. Take your time with it. And be slow to become angry. No matter what, even if you and a friend that you're arguing with can't see eye to eye and you're never going to get totally to a compromise, remember that, you probably love them for a million other reasons. This one thing, if I disagree with my friend over some dumb argument about UT football this year, he's going to be around a lot more than UT's current roster. You know what I mean? Who knows even how many games we'll play this year? That's a whole another issue that we could argue about. So it doesn't even really matter. It's try and see the person for the friendship you have, even after the argument's over. So to apply that to a real level, we believe at Sequoia our motto is head, heart, hands. If we're really taking this stuff into account that we learn on Sundays and Wednesdays, we should be applying it to our life. Well, there's a few tips that this lesson suggests that I think are really viable that I think we can use. So the first thing would be we could memorize this verse. Memorizing verses, I know that's kind of, I'll admit I hate memorization of any kind. It's annoying to me, but this is a great verse, and it's pretty easy to remember. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. That's basically the only part you have to remember. Hey, and then next time you're arguing with somebody over something dumb or that seems big to you, you can still remember that. So that's the first thing. Second thing, and I apologize because I lost my place and now I'm strolling. So we can memorize the verse. The second thing, we can pause and pray. Hey, next time we're arguing with somebody, like I said, maybe if it's over something that we know is trivial, but we just want to be in the argument, maybe it's something big. Is there anything wrong with, just in the back of your head, or maybe when you get a moment and the argument's kind of, there's a pause, or, you leave the situation, but you're going to argue about it more later. Pause and pray. Pause and pray that it goes well. Pause and pray that you guys are able to make it to a compromise, that you'll really be able to see their point and that they'll be able to see yours. You can pray about that stuff. Ask God for, patience in the argument. I think that's definitely viable and something that we should do. And the third thing is empathize. Like I said, we should be, slow to anger and quick to listen. There's a lot of stuff that people have told me at different times in my life that frankly I thought was total BS, but I've learned from experience that it's better off, even if I think at the time, I'm never going to believe that. If I just really try and do my best to understand where they're coming from. Even if you can understand where somebody's coming from, that's going to go a long way, I think. So those are the three things I think we can do. We can memorize the verse. We can pause and pray for our, I don't want to say enemies, but our enemies for the sake of the argument. And we can try and empathize with them. So to sum up, because I'm coming up on 15 minutes, we may not be able to change the way people behave when it comes to conflict and arguing. But we have the chance to change the way we behave in these situations. And so as we go into this week, I think we should all think about, and let's personalize it, one relationship that would be better if you practice this verse. I got one friend in mind. It's actually a different guy than the guy I mentioned at first. But I definitely got one guy who I could do a good job if I gave him some grace in arguing.